Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. In the studio with me today, I have Julianne Watt. Julie is the project coordinator at RedRover Sales and Marketing. RedRover is an advertising agency that integrates sales training and coaching with marketing and public relations, combining traditional and guerrilla strategies. Julie, thank you for joining me today.
No problem. Glad to be here.
So I met you earlier this year when you were kind of in a career transition and you were kind of trying to decide what was next. Can you talk to me a little bit about your previous career?
Sure. So for the past couple of years, I was a district manager for Abercrombie & Fitch. And then before that, I had worked for them and made my way up the ladder into that position.
Oh, that's great. And so from like day to day, what were you kind of doing at work?
I spent a lot of time managing both store managers as well as developing them to become future leaders for the company, as well as developing the assistant managers and following up on day-to-day activities.
Oh, that's great. So how long were you in retail?
A little under 8 years and pretty much right out of college, but I also worked 3 years during college for that same company.
Okay, so most of your career experience up to that point was all in one particular industry.
Yep.
Okay, and I know when we started talking, we were kind of evaluating like new and different sort of areas, and I know a lot of our listeners today are struggling kind of with that same exact issue. When you were starting to look, were there certain things that you knew that you did want or you didn't want sort of in your next opportunity?
I know that when you and I were talking, there was a long list of questions that you had asked me about certain things that I preferred over others, but it was pretty much the only thing that I knew was that I didn't want to work in retail again. I knew that there's corporate environment and independence, startups, and smaller, but I knew that I was just used to a very relaxed, very young environment that was super high-paced, and it was kind of different to try to get somewhere else. I was just kind of at a loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think you were looking also to stay in the same city here in Memphis.
Yep.
And I don't remember if there were other specific requirements when we first started.
No, I think that it was just really, I don't want to be in retail, and I do want to stay in Memphis. The rest of it didn't matter because I felt like I could find happiness somewhere, but I just didn't want to leave this city. It's a good city.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt, too, that it was really important. I felt that it was really important to find a position that really utilized your strengths so that you could, feel challenged and, actually find things that kind of transferred.
I think that was also really tough because I didn't know exactly what my strengths might have been at the time. It was kind of hard.
Yeah. So as we started talking sort of through the coaching process, you explored a number of different options and you kind of mentioned them before. I think we talked some about corporate, nonprofit, advertising agencies. I think we even discussed the possibility of startups. The way that you really started to, I think, narrow it down was through informational interviewing. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about what informational interviews are and then kind of how they helped you in this process?
Sure. So the way that informational interviews translated in my head, it reminds me a lot about like sorority recruitment. So you go in and you really just sit down and talk to somebody from that type of field. So I was lucky enough to get set up with exactly what I needed. I was talking to somebody from corporate nature who really told me the ins and outs about what I should expect, the pros and cons of working there. The nice thing was that she was very straightforward. I can remember coming back the next day and really just being like, man, corporate, sitting in cubicles was not my thing. Like it felt very drab in color, and I'm so used to excitement and social life, and it just didn't have all the glamour. It did have some pros that were exciting, like more money and better benefits, but it just wasn't going to cut it for me. Another one of the interviews that I got set up with was at a technical marketing company, and with that, she was crazy straight to the point, almost a little brutal, and very thankful for it. She literally told me how it was, used all these really cool big lingo words, and I had no idea what she was talking about. And at that point, I was like, wow, I really need to do my research and learn a little bit more. A few more that you set me up on was somebody with a startup business, and he had started his own medical supply company, and it seemed like it was a really awesome idea because that was something I was super considering at that moment. But at the same time, he told me the pros and cons, what it was like to start up, some of the positives about his relationship, some of what you think your mind has to be, what you can expect going forward, and that same thing. And lastly, I'd say the most helpful informational interview was with somebody at another agency who really was going through a similar transition that I was going through. So making a huge jump from some other role into, like, she went from nonprofit into an advertising agency, and that was very confusing and tough for her. So it was great to sit down and relate with that. And then also from that, I guess she liked me enough because she set me up with an interview as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, you can't always assume that an informational interview will lead to a real interview, but sometimes, you get to know someone and they really kind of buy into what you're doing. And I could see how she would really relate to your transition.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like they were super helpful. I learned a ton about what I needed to learn and what I didn't like, and some of what I did like as well.
I remember when you came back from that particular informational interview with the agency that it sounded like you felt like you fit in there. Like, it was a really different feeling to me than when you went to corporate. Like, it felt like it made more sense.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, the corporate world sounded luxurious, but the agency world sounded a lot more like what I'm used to. Very upbeat, fast-paced, more social, fun in a way.
Yeah, and you get to work on a lot of, different brands with different clients, and you do work with much younger people. You're not necessarily stuck in a cube all day. So it felt like the lifestyle of the job was more aligned to sort of where you were coming from. At least that's what it appeared.
Yeah. Definitely. I found them incredibly helpful. I mean, there was also, these people were just I was very lucky to have them very straightforward with me. They were just straight to the point. It was great.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because if you had just gone into a normal job interview, most of the time they won't be that honest.
Right, filled with fluff.
Yeah, because they're kind of like, they're being paid to sit there and try to convince you to come to work there. So they're not probably going to tell you the bad stuff. And I think too, when we did coaching, we could have sort of talked all day long about would corporate be better in agency or startup. But I think until you really have that meeting, I mean, to me, it's so much easier. You meet with someone for like 20 minutes and you learn, volumes of information. So once you determined that you were most interested in the agency world, what else did you kind of do to start to explore, that possibility?
Well, I mean, I think that it was something of obviously getting to know the websites and looking up and doing your research on the companies to see which one you might personally fit in with. But also, I was lucky enough that through networking, you had presented an opportunity from a colleague of yours, Lori Turner, who really just needed someone temporarily to answer phones. With that, you and I both knew that it's like Julie's skill set might be a little bit better than answering phones. However, it was an opportunity to actually get myself into the agency and get like a first world experience type view.
Absolutely. I remember when I called you, I was a little hesitant. I think we talked on the phone.
Right.
And I said, I would never normally recommend this. It's never what I would recommend for you. But the thing is, they need someone for 2 weeks, and it would give you a bird's eye view into an agency. And, it's definitely not where you want to end up in terms of the position. But how much you could learn in that 2 weeks is pretty valuable, I would think.
Right. Like, I literally figured out that environment was a lot of people moving very quickly. There was, and it's still slightly small at the time, but it was just more open. It wasn't so cubicle in a sense. There was lots of color. It felt very creative. Like, just the environment itself felt very fitting towards my personality and what I like.
Absolutely. So how long have you been at RedRover now?
So officially, I started in June, but technically I've been there since April, late March, when they actually announced my official permanent position at RedRover. It was kind of like, oh, we thought she was permanent. I was like, oh, that's cool. They had already accepted me as part of their team. That's great.
That's great. And I got the sense, I could be wrong, I got the sense that they created a special position for you because they'd gotten kind of attached to you in that 2-week period. You just did such a good job.
Yeah, you just kind of loved me. No, I was very thankful in the sense that I think it was also the ability that I was able to demonstrate a work ethic with such a easy job of answering phones or, just regular secretarial duties that it seemed as if they really wanted to invest in me and watch me grow in the marketing world.
Absolutely. So can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing there now?
Sure. I wear a lot of hats. So that's something that I was lucky enough to figure out going into it that I would be. But as their project coordinator, I help the team by keeping them organized and am responsible for trafficking and coordinating the movement of projects throughout the agency, as well as completing special research projects and the editing of various documents. In addition, I help maintain their contracts. I ensure that they are drafted correctly, they read correctly, and that their clients are returning them signed. It's also my responsibility to market RedRover by executing our digital strategy with web, email campaigns, and social media. So totally follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, Pinterest, and Facebook.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So I think I've told you that Lori brags to me about you quite a lot and the kind of motivation that you have. And she tells me she can hear you like running up and down the halls because you move so quickly. But what do you think were your transferable skills that you brought to RedRover from your previous career in retail?
Actually, it's really funny you say that because Lori has always told me that I move so fast that sometimes I might need to slow down just a little bit because I think I've ran into too many walls. But other than that, I think the biggest skill that I've learned is just in retail in general, you learn a lot of urgency, time management, multitasking, and adaptability. But this specifically, my skills within sales management and merchandising and promotion experience, it's really transferable to RedRover because of the fact that they're the only agency in the region that supports their clients in improving both the returns on their marketing investment and the performance of their sales force. So overall, there's just a lot more skills that are transferable than I actually realized.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's so related, and I'm sure, they are just so happy to have you there. So compared to sort of your competitors, maybe at other agencies, what do you think it is that you're kind of bringing, that kind of differentiates you?
So I think that after 8 years of working for Abercrombie, there was a lot of skills that I had that attained. So specifically, some of the few are just like, I spent 8 years hiring people, looking at resumes, looking at skill sets, talking to them, understanding and getting the underlying meaning that they're presenting to you. So I know that reviewing resumes and training others can be super applicable to what we have to offer. In addition, I think that we all know that Abercrombie it's just such a lifestyle brand, and I really understand what it takes to build that brand and how important it is for our salespeople to buy into the brand. So those last 8 years have really given me a different perspective than others in which I see things from a sales perspective. So you can do all you want to market a business, but if your salespeople or those methods aren't up to par, your marketing efforts could go to waste, and that really makes RedRover sales and marketing a perfect fit for me.
Absolutely. And I think, one thing that's interesting about RedRover is with some of their clients, they help to teach them selling skills and they help to teach them how to improve their sales. And you're coming from an environment where that's really what you were focused on, as in a retail space. So that's great. So I know that you are very interested in fashion, rightly so, working in fashion for so long and just knowing you personally. And I would just love to get some tips from you that we could share with our listeners about things to wear or maybe not to wear to job interviews.
So in my old job, I literally wore jeans and cute dresses and things of that nature to work. So it was really hard to understand exactly what business casual meant. For me, I think it was all about who I wanted to be and who I wanted to present myself as. So basically creating my own brand for myself. But I will say that it is important to be comfortable in what you're wearing because honestly, if you're going to an interview and you're feeling really nervous, having on this very uncomfortable outfit is just not going to help build your confidence at all. But at that same time, don't go and PJs or anything. Stay appropriate. Nice slacks, nice skirt, closed-toed shoes. For girls, it's always good to not show your shoulders yet. But I would say that even in one of my interviews where I went to a place where they were dressing super casual, that like they were wearing jeans and a nice shirt. I still wore like black slacks, but I tried to make it a little bit casual by wearing like a linen button-up shirt, and it was summer, rolling up my sleeves.
Well, I think that's a really, you're kind of touching on a point, which is in the corporate world, when you go for an interview, you need to wear a suit. And it's very important that you wear a suit. But when you go to the agency world, sometimes if you wear a suit, it actually comes across very badly because it makes you look too corporate and too stuffy, like you're not going to fit into this creative environment. So to me, what you're describing is really finding a place between the business suit and the really casual look that represents you, that you're comfortable in. And that's what I'm getting from what you're saying.
Definitely. You've always been really good at interpreting my words.
The other question, so what about things like makeup and hair? Like, what do you recommend on that?
I would just make sure that when you're doing your makeup and your hair that you keep it as low maintenance as possible. You don't want to be caught fidgeting with your hair, or, your bobby pin falls out of place and then all of a sudden you just kind of look a mess. And then with makeup, same thing, just very natural, very classic. Keep it to where you feel comfortable, but not overdone. It's, again, if you seem a little too high maintenance, it could come off wrong. You could be one of those needy people that comes off needy because of how you look. It's kind of a double-edged sword, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I think, too, like when you're in an interview, you want the focus to be on your skills, on what you can bring to the table, not on like your bright lipstick or your crazy hairstyle or the weird nail polish that you have on your toes that are hanging out of your shoes. I mean, it's really not the time to show your whole personality.
Right.
Which you kind of alluded to. It's, you could get to know people on a personal level after you're hired. The interview is to talk about your skills and what you can do and really sell yourself and your personal brand that you've kind of, developed over time. I mean, did you find when you were hiring previously in your previous role, I'm assuming in retail, the dress is very different when you go for an interview?
Oh, definitely. When I was interviewing for entry-level manager positions, as I was conducting those, part of the intro to it is don't wear a suit. Make sure you're wearing like jeans and a polo is fine. Flip-flops or, Chucks, very casual. So it was definitely really hard to transition into feeling overdressed, I'd suppose. But again, I feel like this is who I want to be, and that's kind of how I like to present myself. It's just making sure that I'm also adapting slightly to that company's perspective.
Absolutely. So day in and day out, when you're at an agency at RedRover now, how do people dress working there? Is it casual or is it business casual? I'm guessing it may depend on what you're doing that day.
I definitely think it depends on what you're doing that day. I'd say that when you're going out and talking to clients, we try to look more professional as we should, because they are your clients and we need to represent ourselves properly and have people take us seriously. We do have casual Fridays, which are always fun, as well as dog day Fridays, so that might go in it, especially if I have to bring my dog because she'll shed everywhere. But so jeans and a nice shirt is good. But other than that, I'd say like that horrible name of business casual, nice pair of pants, nice dress shirt, or not nice dress shirt, nice pair of pants or nice skirt, nice shirt that's not raggy. Just, it's definitely varies amongst the different personalities that we have there.
Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. Well, do you have any advice for some of our listeners who are making a big career transition, that are feeling discouraged, like they want to do something different and they're really just not sure where to begin?
I can remember coming to you, I was probably like a sad little puppy just walking in the door going, wow. But yeah, I mean, I think my biggest piece of advice is that knowing that it can be discouraging, knowing that it's tough. It can be filled with really exciting moments, sometimes huge letdowns. That's the best piece of advice I can give, is just knowing that and accepting that it's going to be tough. And so that way you can prepare for them, you're aware of them, and you know that they're going to happen. But at the same time, it's going to eventually have a happy ending. Just be prepared for that long search, and it doesn't happen immediately, but I think the last thing is go out and hire you, because you're kind of awesome. You're really there to help me celebrate my wins, to like not celebrate my losses, but be there in support of my losses. And, oh man, that's too bad. And it was really comforting. And I thought that was super helpful.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome. But seriously, it's just, for me, it's knowing what you're about to go to, and knowing that it's going to be hard, and knowing that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you mentioned long search. And I think, your search was actually really quick, relatively speaking. But I think sometimes people picture that it should take like a few weeks. And once you've been in your career for, say, like 8 years, like you have, it can take months, it can take a long time. And, I think just setting that expectation in your mind, and also realizing lots of people are going through this. I mean, I have a lot of clients that come in. There are specific stages in life that I see. And sometimes it's people who are in their 30s that have decided, I want to do something really different. Maybe it's people who are younger and they've decided they want to make a lot more money. Or maybe it's people who are older that have decided money is less important. But whatever that point that they hit is, that transitional period, it is really a struggle, but it's a normal struggle. It's a struggle that a lot of people go through. So I think, looking for support like you did is really important, and sort of having somebody to be your champion and to sort of help to hold you accountable, I guess, to make sure that you keep moving in the right direction.
Right. It was, even when you want to give up hope, you're like, all right, what's next? And you're like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, I think it worked out really well. So is there any other advice that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I mean, I think personally, for me, work is like literally 25% of your life. You might as well do something that you enjoy, and then also like work hard. It doesn't really matter what other people do, and you can't measure your success on them, but what you can measure is your work ethic and how hard you work, and that can really, to me, defines who you are.
Oh, I totally agree. That's great advice. The other thing I thought of as you were mentioning that is sometimes job seekers get really stuck on minimum requirements when they look at a job description. And I don't know if you and I ever talked about this, but if we had just been going off minimum requirements, probably the job you got required some agency experience.
Oh, yeah.
And so I always like to say, let them tell you no. Don't tell yourself no before they even know about you, because I know, like in RedRover's case, they're so thankful to have found you. You have such a skill set that they would not have found in somebody else. And so, it's identifying what your transferable skills are, and, looking for an employer who's willing to give you a chance, because you just need one. And I know that, had you interviewed at multiple different agencies, some would have given you a chance, and others, they may not have been able to make that jump with you kind of mentally from retail to the agency world. But just because one person can't make the jump doesn't mean somebody else can't. And in this case, RedRover was able to do that really easily.
Super thankful.
Yeah. I'm so glad that it worked out. Well, so my very last question for you is, you mentioned listeners can follow RedRover. How can they learn more about RedRover if they're interested, or where can they follow you?
So on Twitter, it's just at RedRover Company. Sorry, everybody thinks I say Red River. I don't know why. But basically, what we are doing on our social media is really trying to stay on top of marketing and sales trends, as well as best practices. You can also check us out on Facebook at RedRover Company, or it's at RedRover Sales and Marketing, and then LinkedIn as well. Also, you can check out our website at www.redrovercompany.com, as well as you can be added to our Rover treat list to get our biweekly newsletters with marketing and sales best practices.
Absolutely. That's great. That's great. And I know, so this podcast won't air until next week, but everybody should check out all this stuff, because I think there'll be a lot of exciting things happening between now and next week that they'll want to look at on the RedRover site.
Yep, but right now it's a big secret.
That's right. That's right. Well, Julie, thank you so much for joining me today. This discussion has been incredibly helpful, and thank you everyone for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.